The little boy had always lived in a lively house, full of laughter and warmth, but everything changed in a single day. His parents, who were his whole world, were gone, leaving him alone in the old house that suddenly felt enormous and empty. The walls that once echoed with stories and songs now seemed to whisper only sadness. Every corner reminded him of the life he had lost, and even the sunlight felt weaker, as if it too was mourning with him. At first, he couldn't believe it had happened. He would wake up in the morning and call for his parents, hoping they would answer, but the silence would greet him instead. It was hard to imagine that someone so small could feel so big a loss, yet there he was, only a boy in a house that seemed to grow taller and darker with every passing day. He remembered the way his mother's voice sounded, soft and comforting, always telling him that everything would be okay, and the way his father used to lift him onto his shoulders so he could see the world from above. But now, those memories felt like shadows that danced just out of reach, and the boy often found himself wandering from room to room, touching things that belonged to them, hoping to feel a piece of them still with him. The house itself seemed to mourn his loss. The old wooden floors creaked loudly under his small feet, the windows rattled with the wind, and the stairs groaned as if they too felt the emptiness. At night, the boy would lie awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet, and sometimes crying quietly so the walls wouldn't hear. He felt small, fragile, and completely alone in the world. He tried to keep busy, doing the little things his parents had taught him, cooking small meals, sweeping the floor, watering the plants in the garden, but every task reminded him that he had no one to share it with. Even feeding the little cat in the backyard felt lonely because he had no one to talk to about it. The boy began to realize that being alone was not just about being by yourself. It was about missing someone who made you feel safe, loved, and important. Sometimes, he would sit by the fireplace, staring at the old photographs of his family, smiling at the images, but tears would come quickly. He remembered birthdays, trips to the park, bedtime stories, and even the small arguments that always ended with hugs. All of it was gone now, leaving only memories that felt both comforting and painful at the same time. The boy also noticed that life outside the house kept moving. Even though his own life had stopped for a moment, he would see neighbors walking past, children playing in the street, and families laughing together, and it would make his chest ache. He wanted to be a part of the world again, but at the same time, he didn't know how to step out of the sadness that had wrapped itself around him like a heavy blanket. Even small things, like the sound of the wind in the trees or the rain tapping on the windows, felt different now. He had once loved those sounds when his parents were around, but now they seemed to echo the emptiness of the house. He would sometimes press his ear to the walls, hoping to hear a voice, a step, or even a whisper, but only silence answered. Despite the sadness, there was a part of him that wanted to keep going. Though he was young, he learned quickly that he had to take care of himself. He cleaned the house, tried to eat, and even went to the small garden in the backyard. Though it reminded him of his mother tending the flowers, each day was a struggle, but slowly, he began to understand that he had to find a way to survive, to continue living even when life felt unbearably hard. And yet, even in this dark beginning, there was a tiny spark inside him, a part of his heart that refused to be completely crushed. It was that spark that made him wake up in the mornings, sweep the floor, and sit by the window watching the world. Even though the house was empty, even though he felt all alone, that little spark reminded him that maybe, just maybe, things could get better, that maybe someone would come, that maybe life could still hold a bit of happiness for him. And so, the little boy continued living in that old house, surrounded by silence, shadows, and memories. Each day was hard, each night longer than the last, but slowly, he began to carry the weight of his sorrow with courage, not because he wanted to, but because he had no choice. This was the beginning of his journey, a journey that would teach him about loss, hope, and the unexpected ways that life can change, sometimes for the better. After the first days of unbearable grief, the little boy had to find a way to live alone. The house was still huge and empty, but now he was beginning to understand that he could not wait for someone to come. He had to take care of himself. Even though he was just a child, every morning, he would wake up before the sun, feeling the cold floors beneath his feet and the quiet that filled the house. There was no one to wake him, no one to call his name, but slowly, he learned to carry out his little routines. Breakfast was always a struggle. He didn't have anyone to cook for him, and even the idea of preparing food sometimes felt too big. But he remembered how his parents had taught him to boil eggs and toast bread, and he tried to do the same. sometimes he would burn the toast or spill the milk, but he laughed quietly at himself, because even small successes gave him a tiny feeling of independence. The smell of food, the warmth of the kettle, and the sound of the wind outside became his companions. Small comforts in the lonely house. During the day, he would wander from room to room, cleaning and tidying up as best as he could. The furniture was old, dusty, and sometimes creaked like it was alive. He would polish tables and sweep the floors, imagining that he was making the house ready for someone who might come. He talked to the empty rooms sometimes, telling stories or sharing little thoughts, as if the walls could answer. Sometimes he would sit on the staircase and just stare at the empty rooms, thinking about how everything used to be, and how quiet it had become. Outside, the garden was overgrown, wild with weeds, but it became his secret little world. He would pick flowers that had survived the winter, water them, and even talk to the little cat that had wandered in from a neighbor's yard. The boy imagined that the garden was a magical place, a place where he could escape his sadness for a little while. The sun on his face, the wind in his hair, and the soft hum of nature gave him moments of peace he could not find inside the house. Evening was the hardest part. He would sit by the window and watch the world moving without him. Families would walk past, neighbors would chat, and children would laugh in the streets, and he would feel both a longing and a pain. He wanted to join them, to run and play, but he was afraid that no one would accept a lonely boy who had no parents. He tried to imagine himself with friends, laughing and sharing secrets, but the quiet of the house reminded him of reality, and tears would sometimes fill his eyes. Despite the loneliness, the boy began to notice small things he had never paid attention to before: the way sunlight spilled across the floor in the morning, the gentle creak of the old staircase, the sound of birds calling to each other outside. Even the old grandfather clock, which had seemed boring before, now became a friend, marking time for him in a steady, reassuring rhythm. Slowly, he learned to find comfort in these small details, and they became part of his daily routine, giving him structure and a reason to keep going. He also started remembering his parents more clearly, not just the sadness of losing them, but the love they had given him, the warmth of his mother's hand, the playful laughter of his father, and the stories they told him at bedtime. Remembering these things made him both happy and sad, but he realized that their love was still a part of him, something that no one could take away. It gave him strength to face each day, even when it felt impossible. At night, he would light a small candle in the kitchen and sit quietly, sometimes talking to his parents as if they could hear him. He would tell them about the day, about the flowers he watered, the toast he burned, and the little cat that had visited. It didn't bring them back, but it made him feel less alone. It reminded him that even in the midst of sadness, he could keep living, learning, and caring for the little things around him. And so, day by day, he continued his life in isolation, finding tiny joys in routine, small victories in managing the house, and quiet moments of comfort in nature and memories. The house remained empty, but he was learning that he could survive, that he could keep moving forward. Even in complete loneliness, he was discovering courage he didn't know he had, and the first seeds of hope were quietly taking root inside him, waiting for the day when someone new might enter his life and change everything. One morning, the little boy noticed something different outside his window. The quiet street, which had always seemed the same, was now filled with the sound of moving trucks and chatter. Boxes were being carried into the house next door, and unfamiliar voices echoed across the yard. The boy pressed his small hands against the cold windowpane, his heart racing. He felt a strange mixture of curiosity and fear. For the first time in months, his lonely world was about to change. He remembered the empty house had felt permanent, like it would stay quiet forever, but now, the movement outside made him realize that life continued beyond his walls. A family had arrived, bringing the smell of fresh paint, packed boxes, and laughter that was new and strange. It was a sound he had forgotten existed, and it made his chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. The little boy stayed hidden behind the curtains, watching every movement. Every box carried into the new house seemed like a story waiting to be told. He noticed a little girl about his age, her hair tied into two messy pigtails, running around and laughing as she tried to catch her older brother. She looked so full of life, so carefree, that for a moment, the boy forgot about the heaviness in his chest. He felt a strange, new feeling bubbling inside him, something he hadn't felt since before his parents died, curiosity mixed with hope, and even a small spark of excitement. The boy wanted to go outside, to see them, to talk, but fear held him back, fear of rejection, fear of change, fear of stepping into a world that felt too bright after so much darkness. Days passed, and the boy watched the family settle in, their voices, their laughter, their playful arguments all reached him through the walls and windows. Sometimes, he would catch the little girl glancing at him and smiling, a small wave following. She seemed to notice him the way he had longed for, and it made him feel seen, even if just a little. One afternoon, he saw her running into the yard, chasing a ball that had bounced too far. She tripped, scraped her knee, and began to cry. Without thinking, the boy ran out, forgetting all his fear. He offered her a hand, steady and reassuring. She looked up at him, her eyes wide but trusting, and accepted it. That small act, simple as it was, felt monumental to him, like he had crossed a bridge into a new world. After that day, small connections began to grow. The boy would linger near the fence, exchanging shy words with the girl, talking about favorite books, animals, and silly games. Their laughter became a new sound that filled the lonely corners of his life. Slowly, he realized that maybe he didn't have to be alone forever. Maybe someone could enter his life and change it in ways he had not imagined. For the first time, the boy felt hope creep in like a soft morning light. It was gentle and careful, but undeniable. The old house didn't feel as empty as before, because now it was near another home that was alive, full of people, voices, and possibility. He began to dream quietly, about friendship, about play, and even about happiness again, something he had thought impossible. The boy also started noticing small ways in which he could connect with the new family, offering to fetch things, helping carry boxes, or simply waving from the window. Each gesture, small as it was, made him feel like he mattered, like he had a place in someone else's world. The walls that had felt so lonely for so long were slowly breaking down, not with loud noise, but with tiny, persistent sparks of human connection. And so, the little boy's world, which had felt frozen in grief and silence, began to move again, slowly, carefully, one smile, one word, one wave at a time. He didn't know yet how much his life would change, but the first seeds of hope had been planted, and for the first time in months, he looked forward to the next day, wondering what new moments of friendship, laughter, and warmth it might bring. The first real connection came one bright afternoon when the little boy was quietly sitting near the fence, trying not to be noticed. He had watched the new neighbors for days, curious but cautious, unsure if he could step out of the shadows and into their world. But that day, something felt different, almost like the air itself was encouraging him. The little girl he had seen running and laughing before approached the fence again, this time holding a small basket of apples she had picked from her backyard. She smiled shyly and said, "Do you want one?" The boy froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. No one had ever offered him anything so freely in so long. His heart beat fast, but a warm feeling spread inside him, something he hadn't felt in months. He nodded, and she handed him an apple, her small fingers brushing his. A tiny spark of friendship passed between them, invisible but undeniable. For a moment, they just stood there, holding the fruit and looking at each other, neither saying much, yet understanding everything without words. The boy realized that this simple act, an apple, a smile, was the beginning of something new, something gentle and hopeful. From that day on, the fence became their meeting place, their small corner of the world where stories, secrets, and laughter could be shared. They began talking about everything, from favorite animals to silly imaginary adventures. The boy told her about the little cat he had found in his garden, and she shared stories about her older brother and the games they played together. Each conversation was a thread, slowly weaving a connection that neither of them fully understood yet. The boy began to feel a sense of belonging for the first time in months. He noticed how easy it was to smile again, how his chest felt lighter, and how the walls of his lonely house didn't seem so high anymore. He realized that friendship could arrive quietly, without ceremony, and it could change everything in ways he had never imagined. Sometimes, they would sit on the grass together, tossing a ball back and forth. The boy noticed that when he laughed, it felt different, freer, brighter, like sunlight breaking through clouds. He had forgotten how much joy could live in simple moments. how comforting it was to share time with someone who genuinely cared. Their laughter echoed through the street, a sound so unfamiliar to the old house that it made the shadows retreat for a little while. Even small arguments became part of their connection. The little girl teased him about his clumsiness, and he teased her back about being too bossy. They laughed and forgave quickly, learning to understand each other in ways words could not describe. Through these little exchanges, the boy began to feel emotions he hadn't felt since his parents were alive: happiness, excitement, and even a gentle courage that made him wonder if he could open his heart to more. The boy also learned to notice the world differently because of her. The flowers in his garden looked brighter, the birds sang louder, and even the wind seemed friendlier when he knew someone else was sharing the day with him. He started imagining small adventures together, climbing trees, exploring the woods, and making up stories about the animals they saw. Each day brought a new moment of discovery, a new reason to step outside of his quiet, lonely life. By the end of that week, the little boy realized that the first connection had changed everything. It wasn't just about talking or playing, it was about trust, about knowing that someone saw him and wanted to be near him. The ice around his heart, built from months of grief and solitude, had begun to crack, letting warmth and hope seep in slowly but surely. And so, the fence, once a symbol of separation and isolation, became a bridge, a place where two lonely worlds met and began to intertwine. The boy no longer felt completely alone, because he had discovered something precious: friendship, real and gentle, like sunlight warming the coldest corners of his life. And though he didn't know what the future held, he finally believed that happiness could grow again, one small connection at a time. After the first shy meetings at the fence, the little boy and the girl grew closer with each passing day. What had begun as small gestures, a shared apple, a smile, turned into longer conversations and laughter that echoed across their yards. The boy found himself waiting for the moments when she would appear, his heart lighter with anticipation. For the first time since his parents' passing, he felt that life could be fun again. They began exploring together, discovering little wonders that had gone unnoticed before. The old garden behind the boy's house, once dull and overgrown, became their secret kingdom. They would tiptoe among the flowers, pretending to be explorers in an enchanted land. The boy showed her the small cat he had befriended, naming it Whiskers, and together they imagined it as a magical creature that guarded their adventures. Each day brought a new discovery, a new game, and a new way to laugh. Without fear. Sometimes, they would build forts from old blankets and chairs in the boys' living room, creating secret hideouts where they could tell stories, whisper secrets, and imagine grand adventures. The walls of the house, which had once felt cold and silent, now echoed with giggles and excitement, transforming the lonely rooms into a world of imagination and joy. The boy realized that friendship could breathe life into even the most sorrowful places. Their bond grew stronger as they shared stories of their lives, dreams, fears, and little wishes spilled out during these quiet afternoons. The girl told him about her school, her brother's teasing, and her love for painting, while he talked about memories of his parents, his quiet life in the old house, and his love for reading. She listened without judgment, laughing at funny memories and offering comfort at sad ones, and in return, he felt heard, valued, and understood, something he had not felt in a long time. The boy began to change in ways he hadn't expected. He laughed more easily, ran faster, and even started helping in small ways around the house to prepare for their adventures. Sometimes he would collect sticks for their forts or sweep the garden path so it would be safe for their games. Each task reminded him that he could still care for the world around him, and in return, the world could care for him. Even small disagreements became lessons in friendship. There were moments when the little girl would insist on doing things her way, or the boy would grow stubborn, refusing to share a favorite book. But instead of pushing each other away, they learned to compromise, laugh at mistakes, and appreciate one another's differences. These tiny challenges built trust, teaching them patience, understanding, and the value of friendship. The boy also began to notice something he hadn't realized before. Life outside the fence felt less intimidating, the streets no longer seemed scary, the neighbors no longer distant, and the world beyond the garden felt inviting rather than frightening. He felt braver stepping outside, knowing that his friend was nearby, ready to share adventures or laughter. The fear and sadness that had filled his days were gradually replaced by hope, courage, and anticipation for what tomorrow might bring. At night, the boy would sit by his window and think about the day, replaying the laughter, the games, and the conversations in his mind. he realized that these moments were slowly healing him, filling the empty spaces his parents had left behind. The little house, once full of silence and sorrow, was no longer just a place of grief. It had become a canvas for friendship, imagination, and new beginnings. The boy began to understand that friendship was more than just companionship. It was a lifeline, a gentle hand reaching into the shadows of loneliness, and a reminder that happiness could grow even after loss. Each smile, each shared secret, each small adventure was a step forward, transforming both of their lives in ways that words could hardly describe. And so, the little boy and the girl continued to grow closer, their laughter mingling with the wind, their footsteps marking new paths in the garden and streets. The world that had once felt cold, silent, and lonely was now alive with possibility, and for the first time in a long while, the boy felt that maybe, just maybe, life could be beautiful again, not just in memories, but in the present, with a friend by his side. As the days passed, the little boy felt a strange mix of excitement and caution. He loved spending time with the girl, laughing, playing, and imagining adventures, but deep inside, he carried a small shadow of fear, a fear that had grown after losing his parents. What if something happened to her? What if he lost this new friendship too? The thought made his chest tighten, and sometimes he hesitated to reach out, even though he wanted nothing more than to be near her. One afternoon, while they were building a fort together in the garden, the little boy noticed the girl hesitating, looking at the old gate that separated their yards. "I'm scared to go over there," she admitted softly, pointing to his house. "It looks so big and dark." He smiled gently, realizing she was feeling the same nervousness he had once carried about the world. Slowly, he took a step toward her, and then another, showing her that it was safe, that sometimes courage wasn't about not being afraid, it was about moving forward even when you were. Over the next few days, they began taking small steps to trust one another even more. They shared secrets they had never told anyone. The girl whispered about her dreams of becoming an artist, about the stories she wanted to paint, and the boy, in turn, told her about the memories of his parents, his favorite bedtime stories, and the quiet corners of the old house he had never shown anyone. With every story shared, the invisible walls around his heart began to crumble, and the girl's laughter became a bridge connecting his lonely world to hers. The boy also began inviting her inside the house, something he had avoided for months. At first, he felt nervous as he opened the door, unsure if it would feel strange to have someone in his space, but the girl's curiosity and gentle energy transformed the rooms. She explored the corners with wide eyes, asking questions, laughing at small things, and touching objects as if they were treasures. And for the first time since his parents died, he felt that the house could be filled with life again. Not just memories. One rainy afternoon, they sat by the fireplace together, watching the drops race down the windowpane. The boy had never shared this room with anyone, but now it felt warm, safe, and alive. He realized that trust was like this small fire. It needed attention, patience, and care, and slowly, it could light up even the darkest spaces. They whispered stories, shared silly jokes, and even planned little adventures for the next day. Their bond grew stronger with every word, every laugh, and every quiet moment. The little boy began to notice changes in himself, too. He was no longer afraid of being outside, or of sharing his thoughts and feelings. He felt braver walking down the street, and when he stumbled or felt unsure, he remembered that someone was there, someone who cared, and that made him stronger. The girl became a mirror of the courage he had inside, reflecting back a version of himself he had almost forgotten. Even challenges became easier with trust. One afternoon, the cat Whiskers ran off into the woods, and the boy panicked, unsure if he could find him. The girl grabbed his hand and said, "We'll look together. Don't worry." Hand in hand, they searched the garden and the small forest nearby, calling the cat's name, and when they finally found him, the boy felt a surge of gratitude, not just for finding the cat, but for realizing that he didn't have to face the world alone, that asking for help wasn't weakness, but strength. By the end of the week, the boy understood that trust wasn't something that happened instantly. It was earned slowly, with patience, kindness, and shared moments. The walls of fear that had kept him isolated were crumbling, replaced by laughter, friendship, and hope. He realized that the girl was more than a companion. She was someone who could walk with him through the darkness, helping him find light again. And so, the little boy continued to grow, step by step, learning that courage and trust could transform even the deepest loneliness. His heart, once heavy with grief and fear, now held space for joy, hope, and connection, and though he knew the future was uncertain, he also knew that with someone by his side, he could face it, bravely and openly, ready to live again. The little boy's world, which had once been heavy with silence and sorrow, slowly began to change. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but a quiet, gentle shift that crept into every corner of his life. The laughter of the little girl, the playful adventures in the garden, and even the simple routines of daily life became threads of light weaving through the darkness he had carried for so long. One morning, he woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains, and instead of feeling the weight of emptiness, he felt something he hadn't felt in months: hope. He walked down the old stairs, noticing the familiar creaks as if they were greeting him, and for the first time, the house didn't seem frightening. It felt alive, filled with possibilities rather than memories of loss. The boy began exploring the house with new eyes, discovering small things he had ignored before: the way the light fell on the old bookshelf, the smell of the wooden floors, and even the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock seemed comforting rather than lonely. He polished old furniture and organized books not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Each small act of care became a way of healing, a way of filling the house, and his heart, with life again. The garden became their kingdom, their safe haven, and a place of transformation. Together, the boy and the girl planted flowers, chased butterflies, and built forts. Each adventure, no matter how small, became a victory over the fear and grief that had once held him captive. The world outside their little playground no longer seemed threatening, and the boy began to feel that he could belong to it again. The little boy also began to reconnect with memories of his parents, but in a different way. Instead of feeling only pain when he thought of them, he started smiling at the memories, remembering their warmth, their voices, and the love that had never truly left him. Their presence became a quiet guide, encouraging him to live fully, even in their absence, and reminding him that love could be carried forward in unexpected ways. One evening, the girl brought over her sketchbook and handed it to him, inviting him to draw with her. At first, he was hesitant, unsure if he could create something beautiful, but as they worked side by side, the fear and sadness that had once held him back melted away. They drew trees, flowers, and even imaginary creatures, laughing at mistakes and celebrating successes together. Each stroke of the pencil seemed to lift a weight from his shoulders, each color adding life to his world. The boy's confidence grew in small but powerful ways. He began walking farther into the neighborhood, waving to other children, and even joining them in games. The streets that once felt intimidating now seemed full of friends and possibility, and he realized that the world outside his house wasn't something to fear, but something to embrace. He was no longer the lonely boy trapped in sorrow. He was a boy discovering life, laughter, and friendship once again. At night, he would sit by the window, gazing at the stars, and feel a deep sense of gratitude. The house, once cold and silent, was now filled with warmth, joy, and hope. The laughter he shared with the girl, the adventures they created together, and the simple moments of connection had transformed his life in ways he never imagined. He realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past, but about allowing new joys and love to grow alongside the memories. And so, the little boy's world became a place of beauty and possibility, a place where sorrow could exist but no longer define him, where grief had taught him resilience, and friendship had taught him hope. His heart, once heavy with loneliness, now held space for laughter, trust, and dreams. He understood that life could change quietly, one small act of kindness, one adventure, one shared laugh at a time. And with the little girl by his side, he finally believed that happiness wasn't just a memory from the past, it could be lived again, fully, in the present. The little boy had come a long way since those first days of silence and sorrow. The house that had once felt enormous and empty was now filled with laughter, warmth, and light. The walls that had echoed only with shadows now carried the sound of two children's voices, running, playing, and imagining adventures together. Life, which had once seemed frozen, was moving forward again, slowly, gently, and beautifully. One morning, the boy woke up to the smell of fresh bread coming from the new neighbor's kitchen. The girl's mother had invited him over for breakfast, and he hesitated for only a moment before stepping out, feeling a flutter of excitement and nervousness. But when he crossed the little yard between the houses, he realized how far he had come. The fear and loneliness that had once held him back were gone, replaced by courage, trust, and a quiet confidence that he had never known before. The boy and the girl spent the day together exploring, laughing, and sharing secrets as they always did, but now their adventures felt different. They were no longer just escapes from sadness, they were celebrations of life, hope, and connection. The boy had begun noticing details he had missed before, the golden light falling through the trees, the sound of birdsong, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Everything seemed brighter, more vivid, more alive, because he was no longer alone. The little boy's parents were still in his heart, of course, but now their memory felt comforting rather than painful. He realized that the love they had given him had not disappeared, it had become a part of him, guiding him, helping him grow, and allowing him to open his heart to new people and experiences. He had learned that life could be sorrowful and joyful at the same time, and that happiness was possible even after loss. Over the next weeks, the boy began to join the girl and her family in small ways, attending neighborhood games, helping with chores, and sharing meals. The world that had once felt distant, intimidating, and cold was now inviting and warm, filled with people who cared, children who played, and friends who laughed. He had discovered that life could continue beautifully, even after tragedy, and that new beginnings were possible when you were brave enough to reach for them. One afternoon, the boy and the girl sat on a small hill overlooking the street, their legs dangling over the edge. They watched the sun set in shades of orange and gold, painting the sky like a promise of better days. The boy realized that he no longer feared the future, because he had learned to carry hope with him, and that hope had grown stronger every time he shared a laugh, a secret, or an adventure with his new friend. He understood that happiness could come quietly, softly, and steadily, and that he had the power to nurture it every day. The little boy also began to think about the lessons he had learned, about resilience, courage, trust, and the importance of friendship. He understood that even though life could be harsh and unpredictable, love and kindness could always find a way in. The house, the garden, the streets, they were no longer just places to live. They were a canvas for joy, laughter, and memories yet to be made, and he was ready to fill them with stories, adventures, and happiness. That evening, as the boy returned to his house, he noticed the old cat Whiskers curled up by the window, the same way it had been when he had first discovered it. He smiled, realizing that some things remained constant, even as life changed. Some things, like love, friendship, and hope, could stay with you forever, helping you grow and heal. And so, the little boy's journey reached a new beginning, a beginning where fear no longer controlled him, where loneliness no longer defined him, where life could be beautiful again, with friends, laughter, and love surrounding him. He had learned that even after the darkest days, happiness could be found, quietly, steadily, in the simplest moments. The house, once filled with silence, now echoed with joy. And the little boy finally knew that life could be lived fully, bravely, and with an open heart. The world was no longer a place to hide from, it was a place to explore, cherish, and love. And the little boy, who had once lived alone, had discovered something greater than anything he could have imagined, that life, no matter how hard it begins, could always offer a second chance, a new story, and a fresh beginning.